Well, welcome back to Whole Bible Study with Taddy Noy. If you're just joining us, we've been walking through one of the most powerful stories in Scripture, the exodus of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. God has sent Moses and Aaron to confront Pharaoh. We've now witnessed 9 plagues, each one more intense than the last. And yet Pharaoh's heart has remained hardened. But now we come to the turning point. Exodus chapter 12 is the moment when everything changes. This chapter doesn't just describe an historical event, it establishes a lasting spiritual tradition for generations to come. Let's read Exodus chapter 12 together. Exodus chapter 12 from the NIV version. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in Egypt, "This month is to be for you the first month of your year. Tell the whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, each man is to take a lamb for his family, one for each household. If any household is too small for a whole lamb, they must share one with the nearest neighbor, having taken into the account the number of people there are. You are to determine the amount of lamb needed in accordance with what each person will eat. The animals you choose must be a year old, males without defect, and you may take them from the sheep or the goats. Take care of them until the 14th day of the month, when all of the members of the community of Israel must slaughter them at twilight. Then they are to take some of the blood and put it on the sides and tops of the door frames of the houses where they eat the lambs. The same night they are to eat the meat roasted over fire, along with bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. Do not eat the meat raw or boiled in water, but roast it over a fire with the head, legs, and internal organs intact. Do not leave any of it till morning. If some is left till morning, you must burn it. This is how you are to eat it, with your cloak tucked into your belt, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. Eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. On that same night, I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn of both people and animals, and I will bring judgment onto all of the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord. The blood will be the sign for you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt. This is the day you are to commemorate for the generations to come. You shall celebrate it as a festival to the Lord, a lasting ordinance. For 7 days you are to eat bread without yeast. On the first day, remove the yeast from your houses, for whomever eats anything with yeast in it from the first day through the 7th must be cut off from Israel. On the first day, hold a sacred assembly, and another one on the 7th day. Do not work at all on these days except to prepare food for everyone to eat. That is all you may do. Celebrate the festival of the unleavened bread, because it was on this very day that I brought your divisions out of Egypt. Celebrate this day as a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. In the first month you are to eat bread without yeast from the evening of the 14th day until the evening of the 21st day. For 7 days no yeast is to be found in your houses, and anyone, whether foreigner or native born, who eats anything with yeast, it must be cut off from the community of Israel. Eat nothing made with yeast. Wherever you live, you must eat unleavened bread. When Moses summoned all the elders of Israel and said to them, "Go at once and select the animals for your families and slaughter the Passover lamb. Take a bunch of hyssop, dip it into the blood in a basin, and put some of the blood on the top and both sides of your doorframe. None of you shall go out of the door of your house until morning. When the Lord goes through the land to strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on the top of the sides of the doorframe and will pass over that doorway. And he will not permit the destroyer to enter your houses and strike you down. Obey these instructions and as a lasting ordinance for you and your descendants when you enter the land that the Lord will give you as he has promised. Observe this ceremony." And when your children ask you, what does this ceremony mean to you? Then tell them it is the Passover sacrifice to the Lord, who passed over the houses of the Israelites in Egypt and spared our homes when he struck down the Egyptians. Then the people bowed down and worshipped. The Israelites did just that, what the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on the throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and the firstborn of all the livestock as well. Pharaoh and all his officials and all the Egyptians got up during the night, and there was loud wailing in Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead. During the night, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Up, leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and herds, and as you have said, and go, and also bless me." The Egyptians urged the people to hurry and leave the country, for otherwise, they said, we will all die. So the people took their dough before the yeast was added and carried it on their shoulders in kneading troughs, wrapping in clothing. The Israelites did as Moses instructed and asked the Egyptians for articles of silver and gold and for clothing. The Lord had made the Egyptians favorably disposed towards the people, and they gave them what they asked for. So they plundered the Egyptians. The Israelites journeyed from Ramses to Succoth. There are about 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children. Many other people went up with them, and also large droves of livestock with both flocks and herds. With the dough of the Israelites had brought from Egypt, they baked loaves of unleavened bread. The dough was without yeast because they had been driven out of Egypt and did not have time to prepare food for themselves. Now the length of time the Israelite people lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of the 430 years, to this very day, all of the Lord's divisions left Egypt. Because the Lord kept vigil that night to bring them out of Egypt, on this night all the Israelites are to keep vigil to honor the Lord for generations to come. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "These are the regulations for the Passover meal. No foreigner may eat it. Any slave you have bought may eat it after you have circumcised him, but a temporary resident or a hired worker may not eat it. It must be eaten inside the house. Take none of the meal outside the house. Do not break any of the bones. The whole community of Israel must celebrate it. A foreigner residing among you who wants to celebrate the Lord's Passover must have all the males in his household circumcised. Then he may take part like one born in the land. No uncircumcised male may eat it. The same law applies both to the native born and to the foreigner residing among you. All the Israelites did just what the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron, and on that very day the Lord brought the Israelites out of Egypt by their divisions." And now for the deep dive of Exodus chapter 12. Exodus chapter 12 is one of the most significant and foundational chapters in the entire Hebrew Bible, not just as a turning point in the story of Israel's liberation from Egypt, but as a theological and socio-cultural anchor for generations to come. It introduces Passover, a ritual both ancient and living, established by God to memorialize the night of deliverance and the birth of a new identity. No longer slaves, but a nation consecrated unto the Lord. To understand the full depth of this chapter, we have to enter the historical, anthropological, and religious world of the ancient Near East. It is not merely a narrative about escaping Egypt. It's a carefully constructed tapestry of divine justice, covenantal identity, ritual formation, and national birth. Let's start with the historical backdrop. The Israelites have been enslaved for centuries in Egypt, and the plagues have escalated in power and symbolism. Now comes the 10th and final plague, the death of the firstborn. But rather than rush into the climax of divine judgment, God gives Moses and Aaron detailed instructions for a ritual, the selection and sacrifice of a lamb. the marking of blood on the doorposts, and the eating of a sacred meal. This is not just a survival strategy, it's a rite of passage. From an anthropological perspective, rites of passages are critical for the formation of identity and community cohesion. The Passover marks the liminal moment, the threshold between slavery and freedom, between Egypt and wilderness, between being a people without a land and becoming a covenant community under Yahweh. Anthropologist Victor Turner describes such liminal moments as times when the ordinary structures of life are suspended and something entirely new is born. Exodus 12 is that kind of moment. It ritualizes the crossing from oppression to divine purpose. God begins by redefining time itself. This month shall be for you the first of months. Exodus 12:2. This is revolutionary. God isn't just giving them a calendar, He's giving them autonomy over their own sense of time. In the ancient world, time was often tied to the rule of kings and the cycle of an empire. Pharaoh's reign would have defined time for the Egyptians. But now God says your new life begins here. Freedom begins with a new way to measure reality. It's the theological equivalent of saying your time no longer belongs to Pharaoh, it belongs to me. Then we move to the ritual instructions for the lamb. Each household is to select a year-old male lamb without blemish. This detail is rich with theological significance. The Hebrew word for blemish is tamim, meaning whole, perfect, or complete. It's the same word used for integrity in moral contexts. God requires the best, not out of cruelty or extravagance, but because the act of worship is formative. By choosing a perfect lamb, the people are reminded that redemption costs something. Sacrifice in the ancient world was never casual. It was meant to reorder your heart. The lamb is to be slaughtered at twilight, literally between the evenings, a Hebrew phrase, bin ha-abrayam, that suggests the time between sunset and full darkness. This liminal time once again reinforces the theme of transition. The moment of death happens in the in-between, the threshold of time, a threshold of time, just as this event is a threshold in Israel's history. The blood of the lamb is to be painted on the doorposts and intel of each home. This act would have appeared bizarre, perhaps even grotesque to outside observers, but within the context, it's profoundly symbolic. In many Near Eastern cultures, doorways represented spiritual boundaries. To mark a door was to dedicate it or to protect it. The Israelites were essentially declaring their households to be under the authority of Yahweh, not Pharaoh. The blood was not for God's benefit. He didn't need to see it to know who lived there. It was for the people to visibly claim allegiance and to take part in the ritual of faith. Interestingly, this protective act also echoes a traditions found in Mesopotamian and Egyptian culture, where symbols or blood markings were used to ward off evil spirits. But here, the meaning is inverted. It's not a pagan rite or of protection, but a divine sign of covenant trust. The destroyer, often interpreted as the angel of death or divine agent, passes over the marked houses. Thus, the word Passover, Pesach, which in Hebrew carries a connotation of protection or sparing, not just skipping. The meal itself is rich in symbolism. The lamb is to be roasted whole, head, legs, and internal organs intact. Boiling or breaking it apart would alter its form. Keeping it whole preserves its integrity and points to its unity. Unleavened bread is also required, matzah, bread without yeast, because there would be no time for dough to rise. Yeast throughout Scripture becomes a symbol for corruption or sin, but in this case, it is primarily a symbol of urgency. They are leaving Egypt tonight. There is no time for slow preparation. It is the bread of haste, of exile, of deliverance. Bitter herbs are also commanded, likely including wild herbs like chicory or endive, meant to recall the bitterness of slavery. Taste in this ritual becomes memory. To eat this meal is not just to nourish the body, but to ingest the story, to feel it in the mouth, to remember it in the gut. The ritual is sensory theology. It involves the body so the soul remembers. One of the most sociologically fascinating aspects of this chapter is the way God institutes this as perpetual ordinance. You shall observe this rite as a statute for you and your sons forever. Exodus 12:24. It's not a one-time event. It becomes an identity marker. Every generation will reenact this moment. Sociologist Peter Berger talks about plausibility structures, the systems of symbols and rituals that uphold belief in a community. Passover becomes Israel's primary plausibility structure. It reminds them annually who they are, where they came from, and who God is. God also gives detailed instructions for how future generations will teach this story. And when your children ask you, what do you mean by this service? You shall say, it is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover. Exodus 12:26-27. This anticipates a core Jewish educational method. Ma Narishtana, the questions of the children at Passover Seder. In other words, God designs this event to be remembered by invitation, it's not imposed. It's wondered about. The curiosity of children becomes the doorway to revelation. As we move through the chapter, we see the plague unfold, and at midnight, the Lord strikes down the firstborn of Egypt. The Hebrew root for firstborn is bakor, which also connects this blessing and inheritance. This was not just an act of judgment, it was a direct strike at the theological center of Egypt's power. Pharaoh, who claimed divine status, could not protect even his own son. The gods of Egypt, associated with fertility, protection, and life, were revealed as powerless. This was not random violence, it was theological dethronement. In Egyptian religion, the firstborn son of Pharaoh was often seen as a divine being destined to take the throne and maintain Ma'at, the divine order. By taking the firstborn, Yahweh declares that he alone is sovereign over life and death, order and chaos. It is the undoing of Egyptian cosmology. It is the fall of an empire, not just militarily, but spiritually. Then we come to the Exodus itself. Pharaoh, shattered by grief, finally releases the Israelites, but there is one more to this departure than a quick escape. Verse 35 tells us the Israelites asked the Egyptians for silver and gold, jewelry and clothing, and the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. This strange moment where the slaves plunder their former masters is often called the despoiling of Egypt. But it's not looting, it's reparative justice. The wealth of Egypt is redistributed, the oppressor is undone. Sociologically, this is the reversal of power dynamics. Spiritually, it is a sign of God's vindication. And then the numbers, about 600,000 men on foot besides women and children. Scholars have long debated this figure. In Hebrew, the word aleph, often translated thousand, can also mean clan or military unit. Some scholars suggest the actual number may have been smaller based on logistical and archaeological considerations. But regardless of the numerical size, the narrative impact is clear. A multitude of people, once enslaved, now walk free as a people of promise. Even more stunning, the mixed multitude that goes with them. Exodus 12:38 says that a rabble or mixed group also joined them. These were likely other oppressed people in Egypt, possibly Semitic foreigners or Egyptians sympathetic to Israel's cause. This reveals something beautiful. The Exodus was not ethnically exclusive. From the very beginning, God's redemptive act had room for others. The covenant community was never about bloodline alone. It was about allegiance to Yahweh and participation in the story. This is reinforced in the later verses where God gives rules for how outsiders can participate in Passover. Only those who are circumcised, who have entered into the covenant, may partake. This is not ethnic gatekeeping, it's covenantal inclusion. Anyone, regardless of origin, can join if they bind themselves to the God of Israel. The chapter ends with a summary. And on that very day, the Lord brought the people of Israel out of the land of Egypt by their hosts. That word hosts, tizvatem, is a military term. They leave not as a ragged band of refugees, but as an organized force, God's army. This is not just an escape, it's an act of divine reformation. A people who were once scattered and are now called together. A people who were once voiceless are now narrating their own story. From a theological perspective, Exodus 12 is the gospel in miniature. Deliverance from not through merit, but through blood. Freedom is not abstract. It's grounded in a meal, a ritual, a story. The lamb points forward to the ultimate lamb in Christian theology, Jesus, whose death and resurrection will echo the themes of substitution, redemption, and new creation. But even within the Jewish context, this chapter is revolutionary. It decentralizes divine power from temples and priests and brings it into the home. The Passover is not performed by priests. It's led by fathers and mothers within families across tables. It democratizes holiness. It plants the sacred in the ordinary. That's radical. And that's where the power of Exodus 12 lives on. Now for some final reflections. There's something deeply moving to me about how God reshapes the very rhythm of life in this chapter. He reorients their calendar, their rituals, their meals, even their memories. Everything becomes a part of the redemptive story. It reminds me that our faith isn't just about what we believe, it's about how we live, what we celebrate, what we remember. I'm struck also by the way this chapter weaves justice and mercy together. On one hand, there's devastating judgment, the death of the firstborn. On the other hand, there is divine protection, provision, and promise. This isn't an easy chapter emotionally, but it's honest. God takes sides with the oppressed, and when he delivers, it's thorough, it's embodied. It leaves no part of life untouched. And perhaps most powerfully I see in Exodus 12, a God who invites his people not just to receive salvation, but to rehearse it, to retell it, to make it a part of the rhythm of their lives forever. That's what I want to. Not just a moment of faith, but a lifetime of remembering and living into the story God is telling. If something in this chapter stirred your heart, or if you noticed something I didn't touch on, I'd love to hear it in the comments. We're discovering this together. That's the joy of this journey. Thank you for walking through this beautiful, heavy, and hopefully hope-filled chapter with me. May you carry the story of deliverance in your spirit today, and may you never forget that God, the God who saves, does so with purpose, power, and love. So we will see you in the next chapter of Exodus tomorrow.